Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mias, and today we're actually going to be talking about the card Transmigration Prophecy. So we'll be going over its applications, its pros and cons, which kind of decks can actually play it, and of course, before you start, friendly reminder to like and subscribe, and also check the new Discord server. Link is always going to be in the description box below, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so for starters, it's a normal trap card, and it is not a hard once per well, I mean, it's just not a once per turn, and the fact that it's a normal trap card is pretty nice because you can actually access it with Lilith and with Trap Trick very easily. So if you are willing to play multiple copies of this, quote unquote, you can actually go all the way from, I don't know, 1 to 9 because, you know, Trap Trick, Lilith. If your deck is, for example, Eldritch, well, you might actually be playing those cards, so it's actually good for you. And the fact that it's not once per turn is obviously great because if you draw multiples, well, you can pretty much use every single one of them in one turn. Now we're actually going to get into the juice of the video. So first of all, this card actually doesn't banish. It shuffles back from the graveyard into the deck, which is a really interesting mechanic, and it actually applies for both players. You can shuffle back your own cards as well as your opponent's cards. Most of the time it will be your opponent's cards, but don't worry because I will be talking about the interactions where this is actually even better technically if you use it on yourself. But the fact that it actually doesn't banish, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's kind of bad because your opponent doesn't actually permanently lose a resource. He can, you know, get it back. So in simplified game state and kind of top deck mode, he can actually draw back the card or be able to, I don't know, search it out, special summon it back from the deck, something like that. So for example, if you make them lose like a Ben 10, it's not really like it was getting banished, so they can still get it back. But the fact that it actually doesn't banish the card, like I said, actually has its own interesting applications for two reasons. Alright, so for the Ben 10 example, actually, you might already know how this interaction works, but basically, let's just say your opponent uses a Drytron effect to tribute Ben 10 from the hand or field as cost. The card didn't, you know, it hit the graveyard, but it didn't have the chance to actually activate yet, and we're still trying to like resolve the effect of the Drytron monster. So what if I actually chain Transmigration Prophecy to that Ben 10? Well, unlike DD Crow, it's actually going to get shuffled back into the deck and not be able to activate its effect whatsoever. Cards cannot activate their effects in the deck, which is really insane, because if you were to DD Crow the Ben 10, it obviously doesn't matter the fact that it actually got banished, because Ben 10 only says if this card is tributed. It doesn't have to be tributed and sent to the graveyard, so it's not like Graph where they go Twin Twister, discard Graph, you go DD Crow and the Graph doesn't trigger because Graph says if this card is sent to the graveyard. So ironically, against cards like Cyber Angel Ben 10, it's even better. And you might actually laugh at this one, but honestly, the fact that it actually shuffles back your own cards is actually really huge. The fact that you can actually get back your resources. For example, let's just say you have only one copy of Anaconda, and then in your deck you have one Red Eyes Fusion, one Dark Magician, one Red Eyes, and your first Anaconda gets like Veilored or something. Next turn, your opponent doesn't really do too much. You can actually go Transmigration Prophecy to get back the Anaconda from your graveyard through your extra deck, and then make another, like, Anaconda again. So your opponent was like, oh, what? I wasn't expecting you to do something like that. Or obviously it's just an example, but one of my personal favorite uses of this card is, let's just say, Cyber Dragons with Cyberload Fusion, because Cyberload Fusion already shuffles back your banished resources. So imagine being able to shuffle back the card that shuffles back the cards that you need in order to play. It almost ends up being like an infinite loop and virtual, just endless amount of resources at your disposal because you're just always cycling back the exact same cards, which is obviously really nice. Oh, and I've made a tip video on something like that, but basically the fact that you're changing the location of a card in your graveyard also allows you to play around cards like Called by the Grave. For example, if you use something like an Ash on your opponent's card and your opponent chases Called by the Grave, you can go Transmigration Prophecy to target your Ash, and then either another card in your graveyard or a card your opponent has in their graveyard. And this is like a 3-in-1 because your opponent's Called by the Grave gets countered since your target is actually no longer banished by it. It goes back into the deck, but also the card, you know, successfully resolves, so your Ash, whatever, it's going to hurt your opponent, and on top of that, you can make them lose another card since it actually banishes 2 cards. Now, a slight drawback is the fact that it actually says target 2 cards and not target up to 2 cards, so there are certain situations where very early on, you might just not be able to use this only because both players don't have, you know, in total at least 2 cards, but honestly, that's barely a flaw that you should actually consider. Most of the time, you want to time this so know that you will always be shuffling back 2 cards and not just 1. So honestly, the target up to 2 wouldn't have changed that much. Sure, it would have been nice, but it's not the end of the world. Oh, and I know this might sound kind of random, but the fact that it actually doesn't banish makes you randomly play around Artifact Lancia and Imperial Iron Wall. Lancia a bit less because you're actually using this as a trap card, obviously, during your opponent's turn more often than not. But I guess certain times there are some situations where, you know, you'd be like, I want to use this card Transmigration Prophecy aggressively, like on my own turn, so I can get back my cards and then combo off because my missing combo pieces are in my graveyard, for example. So this is one of its usage, and this is one of the reasons why I love Transmigration Prophecy so much. It's just such a versatile card that not only interrupts your opponent but also helps you. As for the kind of decks that can actually play this, well, there are so many. For example, just any trap deck in general, like Eldritch, Altergeist, Guru, Cyber Dragon traps. Ironically, I played this personally, and it's not just me. It's crazy because I had that thought of playing Transmigration Prophecy back in like 2020, even before this year, like very early on in 2020 though. It's crazy because in, I believe 2021 or end of 2020, Kevin Rodriguez, so Distant Coder, actually told me like, yeah, I actually played this card in Unchained. It's just ridiculously good. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it really is. Like the fact that you can just, like I said, have so many options at your disposal. If you're playing Trap Trick, well, all the better. Being able to cover just more ground with one single card is always very, very welcome. So do I think this card is a really, really good staple and should be in every single Trap deck? Well, definitely not. I think this is really player dependent. It's actually kind of like a personal preference kind of thing, and it's also meta dependent. So if the graveyard doesn't actually, it's not that relevant, which is rarely the case, well, Transmigration Prophecy won't be that good. And honestly, I want to say, if you can actually get like the full effect, being able to also capitalize off of the fact that you're getting back your resources, if it's good for your deck, well, definitely consider it. Otherwise, I want to say cards like DD Crow, Called by the Grave, and stuff like that are probably just gonna do a much better job, but you can actually still play them in conjunction on top of your Transmigration Prophecy, plus like Trap Trick package or whatever. So yeah, that's all I had to say for this beautiful, I guess, card review on Transmigration Prophecy. If you guys have any comments or feedback or anything, idea suggestions, deck list to submit, remember that my Discord server is up and running, so make sure you actually go visit it. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, other beautiful package, and I will see you next time. Peace.